Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Monday, June 27th, 2022 Gardner Planning Commission meeting to order. Everyone will please rise and state the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now move into roll call, starting on my right.
Commissioner Souza here.
Commissioner Ham here.
Commissioner Hanson here.
Commissioner Mader here.
Commissioner McNair here.
Commissioner Juneman here.
Commissioner Cooper here.
We have 7 commissioners in present. A quorum is obtained. Moving down to the consent agenda. All matters listed within the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the Planning Commission for study. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted upon by one motion with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item from either the Planning Commission or from the floor, that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Is there any item any member of the commission would like to have moved from the consent agenda? Any item any member of the public would like to have moved from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion that we approve the consent agenda made by McNair with a second by Hanson. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 7 in favor. Regular agenda item number 1. Prairie Fire Crossing, rezoning is Z-22-03 and associated preliminary development plan, PDP-22-03. This is a public hearing item. Approximately 0.3 miles north of 175th Street along Kill Creek Road, south of St. John's Highlands, Plat. We have a staff presentation this evening.
We do. Hello. This application is for a rezoning from the R1 single family residential and RP3 planned garden apartment districts to the RP-4 planned mixed density neighborhood district. It is accompanied by a preliminary development plan that is intended for the duplex compact building type, and it also includes the preliminary plat for the proposal. The property is almost 25 acres and is located approximately 0.3 miles north of 175th Street along Kill Creek Road. This is north of the Gardner Municipal Airport, adjacent to the St. John's Highlands and St. John's Trace subdivisions. Prairie Brook Villas is just to the east. The property is vacant land. There are 2 small streams that run through the property, one from the west and the other from the south. They join at the northeast area of the property and are in a future conditions floodplain. The applicant has been working with the Corps of Engineers on this. All utilities are available nearby the site. A gravity sanitary sewer main runs beneath the stream coming from the west towards the east through the site, and that will have to be rerouted for the development to occur. The surrounding zoning, we can see that we have R1 to the north and the west, RP3 to the east, and the south is zoned R1 and RP3. Please note that the only portion that is being rezoned from R1 to RP-4 is in that northwest corner. It's just one small spot. The rest is zoned RP3. The preliminary development plan proposes to have 62 lots, each one with a duplex on it. This results in almost exactly 5 units per acre. Prairie Fire Crossing includes trails throughout it and will include an amenity center, which you can see on the east side. Tract A in the northeast corner and Tract C in that center portion will be used as open space for drainage and rainwater management. And then if you looked at Tract F, which is shown running along the southwest portion, it was necessary to keep as unbuilt so that the Gardner Airport could have its runway protection zone. The plan shows 2 phases. The first phase is on the east side and is to include the amenity center, and phase 2 is on the western half. The comprehensive plan identifies low-density residential areas as primarily consisting of detached single-family homes, but may also include duplexes or triplexes arranged in a low-density format on larger lots, with buildings that are in character with typical single-family homes. The LDC translates low-density residential future land use into the RE residential estates, R1 single-family residential, and R2 two-family residential districts to develop more walkable neighborhoods with a mix of housing types and connections to walkable community centers. So now for this proposal, while the base zoning is R4, the development having 5 units per acre is more typical of R2 duplex developments we see. This parcel is located in the new growth area of the residential areas plan, which is intended to provide opportunities to contribute to and enforce the city's existing character and identity. The lots in the associated plan are larger than the nearby single-family lots in St. John's, but are smaller than the townhome lots in Prairie Brook Villas. The development does not meet all standards for the neighborhood yard frontage type, and we'll have deviations for that listed later. Another part is to ensure that the character of new residential areas are compatible with existing neighborhoods and reflect the intended character of Gardner in terms of block size and configuration. This development is of a similar character to the existing development in the area. So, staff findings for the preliminary development plan. The plan reflects generally accepted and sound planning and urban design principles by providing a variety of housing types in the area and community, and fiscally responsible extension of utilities. The benefits from any flexibility in the standards allow the project higher-end amenities for the residential and allows for garage structures similar to recent duplex developments in other parts of Gardner. The project will benefit the general public health, safety, and welfare of the community by providing park and open space, utility extensions, and public street extensions. So now moving on to the deviations, there are 4, and these are similar to ones we've seen for other R2 developments. The first is to increase the amount of hardscape in the front yard to allow each unit of the duplex to have a separate 2-car driveway. The second is to allow the driveway to act as the pedestrian connection between the building and the front sidewalk. The third deviation is for the right-of-way access width limit to allow each unit to have a 2-lane driveway. And then the fourth is for garages, where each unit will be able to have a two-car garage that's front-loaded. Staff findings for the preliminary plat. The application is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan. The plat is in compliance with the Land Development Code, and the plat does not deter any existing or future development on adjacent lots. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the rezoning from R1 and RP3 planned garden apartment districts to RP-4 planned mixed density neighborhood district and associated preliminary development plan and preliminary plat with the conditions in the suggested motion. Staff is available for questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have the applicant with us this evening? there's anything you'd like to bring forward, please state your name and address for the public record.
Todd Allenbrand, Payne and Brockway, 426 South Kansas Avenue, Olathe, Kansas. I'm here with one of the developers of the project, Prairie Highlands Crossing, Michelle Thompson, and her partner is out of town this evening. We just want to thank staff for their diligence and assistance in getting this project brought to you guys for approval, and we're here to answer any questions, and we're supportive of the staff report. Thank you.
All right, Beans, this is a public hearing item. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you would like to comment on this item, please come forward, state your name and address for the public record. I'll limit individuals to approximately 3 minutes. If you are speaking on behalf of a group, we'll go 5 to 7 minutes. I'll be pretty loose with it, but please keep your comments concise, and we welcome them. So please come forward, anybody that would like to speak on this item.
Hi, I'm John Theismann, live on 17255 Jennifer Street, so I'm right on the border of this proposal. I don't know if, I suppose my question is related to the gentleman that were just here, but a lot of us, when we moved into that subdivision, especially when we chose to build or move into the lots that we moved on to, were pretty much guaranteed, which in real estate, what are guarantees that are verbal, but that all that area was going to pretty much always remain green space, especially right up next to our property line due to the flight patterns of the planes nearby, et cetera. And so many of us chose our lots because of that. And I understand he did mention a little bit about that when he talked about the proposal, but obviously that whatever safe space there is for the planes is going to be shrunk. And I guess my big question is, right now we've got a lot of green space behind us. That's, like I say, that's why we chose to move there. Is anything going to remain with that? Is this going to be built right up to our property line? Is everything going to be demolished? If so, are new trees going to be planted in that area to kind of make a separation between what's being built now and what's already there, just to kind of have a little buffer zone? Or is this going to be like, I'm going to be looking right out at somebody's face when I come out my back door? That's a lot of us, that's our main concern. I can't fight City Hall is what we've always heard, so I think it's probably going in. There's probably nothing we're going to be able to do about it, but these questions would just be nice to have answered.
Absolutely. Point taken, and I'll be keeping track of the comments made so we can ensure we have the correct discussion amongst the commission, and also we have the applicant here. So, thank you. Any others that wish to speak? Please come forward. State your name and address for the public record.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ronald Ortega, 17273 Jennifer Street, just neighborhood of John. And just to express the same concerns that he mentioned, but I've also been considering, since we're talking about duplexes and triplexes, which means more traffic considerations, as well as limitations for amenities in our neighborhood. So we don't have parks or anything that our children can benefit except for whatever is being proposed in this program, in this development. So I'd like to see if there has been any considerations as well for the public. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
My name is Joseph Cariani. I live at 17201 Jennifer Street, Gardner, Kansas. Ron and John are neighbors of mine, and my house, I've been there for 18 years. There's an open area right behind my house. I don't know, was it R1 that he mentioned? That's big giant square right there. Anyway, at one time I kind of thought they talked about keeping that open for the airport there and nothing back there. And then I thought they talked about maybe putting a park back there at one time, but I didn't hear anything more about that. So I don't know. Anyway, it would be a great community thing to have something like that in addition to what they wanted to do back there. I mean, I personally, like to have, our kids, they play in the back there a lot on that big open area, and they don't have a park or anything. So I think it would be a good idea to have something developed into that plan if possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Any others wishing to speak this evening? Please come forward and be heard. Seeing no one else approaching the podium to make a public comment, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearings.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing made by McNear with a second by Commissioner Ham. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Motion carries. Okay, this is a planning commission discussion time, so I'll just start down on my right with Commissioner Souza. Questions, comments? We have the applicant, we have staff.
Just a question to staff. Well, since this development is going to be close to the airport, municipal airport, do they have any report from them or anything from them stating that they're okay with the development, or
Maybe
is it
having
discussed
that.
in this phase, or is that, how's it work?
So I do know that Public Works they're in charge of the runway protection zone and determining what space they need for that. So the applicant did actually adjust their plan to give, I think it was 40 feet of that tract F. That's how they needed just a tiny bit more of that to keep that safe for them.
I'm gonna go ahead and add to that for just a second too. The RPZ is the mandatory protection area for the operation of the runway, the north-south runway in this area. So that 40 feet was required in order to accomplish the full distance of the RPZ in that area. As far as the flight corridor or anything coming in there, as far as approaches or takeoffs, there will have to be a filing made with the FAA regarding the structures and different things that could happen there, and those are all checked for height requirements by the FAA, but also by Public Works. Public Works is the managing entity for the airport, so.
No further questions.
Yeah, go
Can
ahead.
I ask a
Chime
question
in.
kind of as a follow-up to
There's something
that? So
follow up.
do we have a map that you can kind of pull up and kind of illustrate what that buffer zone is, what that looks like visually so people can kind of identify? I mean, I kind of have an idea where it's at.
Yeah,
Maybe.
we'll get the
There we go. That's much better.
So I'm going to try to describe it a little bit from the aerial, and then we can come back to the actual plat map. The property where you see the bright yellow that says RP3, just south of the red line there, so it's kind of a rectangular property, runs from 175th Street north. That is city-owned property. The RPZ, which is the runway protection zone, is kind of a trapezoidal kind of area that extends from where the runway ends and comes out at two angles, but it's fully within that RP3 area, except for about 40 feet of it. And that's where, when you look at that red line, the requirement that the track F is hitting is it covers the RPZ as it would enter into the development itself. So there's a small, on this exhibit here, there's a small area that would be in your lower left-hand corner. You can see the long rectangle that's identified as a tract. That is to incorporate the RPZ, and you can see the two dashed lines that are coming up there at an angle. That's the RPZ area. It would then go up into that tract F, but it ends at that point.
So everything south of that line to 175th would be not developed.
It's city-owned property, and it is intended to be protected as open space, correct? Now, this also limits the operations of the airport as well as the length of the runway, too. So the RPZ is tied to that distance and how the aircraft, the types of aircraft that fly into it and what's going on there at that operation. So, for instance, at New Century Airport, where we've had discussions and the Airport Commission gets involved over there with the county, that RPC is a little bit different because it has to do, again, with the runway itself and the operations of the airport. So if the runway's extended and has larger aircraft, then that protection zone grows with that. So this would be it's an FAA requirement, and Works, again, is in charge of making sure that we administer that right, because it is tied to airport funding. If we're not meeting FAA requirements, we're not gonna get any funding to improve the airport facilities. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hand, any comments?
Yes, there was something, in the staff comments that it's probably a cosmetic thing. Under the review criteria, the staff comments, the applicant is proposing a compact duplex development with ...
Sorry about that. Yeah, with the amenity center and the open space to manage all the drainage.
Okay, so that's what that was, okay, so with the amenities. So, and this is probably a question for the developer, going back to our public hearing comments about what's gonna happen with the green space. Do you guys have any, like, what's gonna happen with that green space? With development, what are your plans with that?
Todd Allenbrand, Payne and Brockway. When you say green space, do you mean the green space that we're showing on our plan preserving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the green space that's in the northeast corner of the property, that's where there's a trail that goes around the outside. That's gonna be cleaned up because there's some issues with the drainage. I don't know if anybody's been out to that site and noticed that there's some drainage challenges with the property. So we're gonna clean the site up, get it so it drains properly during construction, and then replant that all back into native vegetation and just leave it that way. So it'll just be native, however that grows up, as well as the track in the middle between the lots. That's going to stay native as well. We're gonna plant everything, basically all the tracks are gonna go back in as native vegetation, except where the pool and the parking lot and the playgrounds are at. Those will probably be some type of turf. They haven't really discussed it yet. And we're also we're evaluating now on the slender tract in the middle if we're going to be able to do a vegetated swell, which is a water quality feature, or if that's gonna have to be piped, but we're not at that point knowing if that's the direction we're gonna go. We're leaning towards the vegetated swell for water quality purposes, but we're not sure yet. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think so. Thank you.
Okay.
I think the other thing, in the motion will be the traffic impact study, because I know there was the comment from the public about traffic concerns. So that is in the motion that we need the traffic impact study, correct?
Yeah, there will be a requirement for traffic impact study. There's a preliminary traffic analysis that's done typically with residential. It's not as intense as a commercial development, because commercial development has a lot more trips associated with it. But there's usually a traffic analysis done to ensure that the circulation patterns in the road facilities there will meet that or receive that capacity. I am going to add to the applicant's comment on green space and open space as well. Coming from the north, and I can't remember the name of the street there, there is also a green space track that comes down along the area that kind of comes up towards, what is that, 172nd there. There's a strip of green area that is along that roadway as well that's incorporated into this plan. I'm going to let Bob talk for a second, because I do know the public raised the issue about buffering in open space. So I'm going to let Bob speak to the buffering that would be required adjacent to the single-family homes that exist today.
Awesome. We get to talk about buffering and level 2 buffering. Not a level 4, but level 2. So typically when we have different zoning or different uses, our code actually requires different levels of buffering. In this case, this is would be a level 2 buffering around, buffering the single family to the north, to the compact, and also to the west. Would require a level 2 buffering, which is, well, it's 1 tree per every 50 feet and 1 shrub per every 10 linear feet of at least 8-foot perimeter depth. So they will have to provide some form of buffering, and usually the landscaping plans, we don't get into great detail on the preliminary development plan, but usually when they start bringing in the final development plan, that's when we'll see a full-blown landscape plan out there.
I think that's all I have for now.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. One question would be just kind of as a follow-up to some of the public comments. So if I'm not mistaken, there's 62 lots that are being proposed in the development, is that correct? And do we have a feel for, of the 62 lots, how many of those will be single-family and how many will wind up with some sort of multifamily housing?
All the lots will be duplex, so they will all be duplex according to the preliminary development plan. So you've got 124 units. Is it? Yeah. Bob's correcting me. The technical term is single-family attached, but they're duplexes. They're twin homes, so they're attached units. So each lot will have one structure on it with 2 units, basically. So it is a duplex development. Just to ensure, again, this kind of brings back a little bit of the discussion when we start looking at R4, R3, R2 zoning. Even though the R4 zoning may allow other types of housing, the preliminary plan is what will lock in this particular type of housing.
Okay, another question. I think there was a comment made by one of our citizens regarding when they acquired their home and discussions that occurred after they purchased their home as to what was potentially going to occur in this area. Can we go back to the background and history of this piece of property and just kind of have staff review, the platting history, what that's looked like since inception?
So the history of this development, this was really a kind of a mixed use, I believe right around 100 acres development that was planned for this area. And I do believe on this site they were planning garden apartments as part of that overall master plan. Now, again, and forgive me, but I can't remember the date as to when this was before the Plan Commission and then also the council. But it's obvious that that didn't develop because this parcel has remained vacant. It is a difficult parcel to develop. May have had something to do with it. But the original plans were garden apartments. I believe they had 4 plexes, single family. And that's about it.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner McNear.
Yes, I had just a couple of questions. First one is, have all the permits and sign-offs by the Corps of Engineers been obtained yet? For the relocation of the sewer line and drainage?
Todd Allenbrand, Payne and Brockway. The jurisdictional assessment has been completed with the Corps, and it was determined what streams would be jurisdictional, which in this case, all streams are jurisdictional. And part of that, we have made submittal to the Corps for an individual permit. Those just take about 6 to 8 months, so it's a process that we go through with the permitting for the Corps, and it should be in place. We can't start any construction activities until the Corps has the permit in place. So our timing is we should be done with phase 2 or phase 1 construction plans and waiting on the approval, or the approval's in place and then we're starting construction. As for the sanitary and the water, those approvals are submitted through KDHE and those don't take place until construction documents are prepared. So, we've got 3 months, probably a couple months or so before we're ready to get to a point where we'd have construction documents.
Follow up to that.
Okay.
What is the probability that you think if it's 6 to 8 months out that the Corps of Engineers will approve that, and if they don't, what happens then?
That's a difficult question to answer. From my experience with developments like this, the Corps has approved them 100% of the time. No matter, going back 10, 15 years, we've never seen an issue on a residential development. On commercial, yeah, we've had some restraints with Corps, and it usually just means we have to take another step in a longer process. But I would expect the Corps would approve this. We don't do these assessments. It's companies similar, I don't want to plug them out loud here, but like Terra Technologies, companies like that take care of Corps permitting and such, and that's who's actually handling this for us right now.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
I'm going to interject, Madam Chair, just very quickly too. So related to that question, what would happen in regard to the zoning if it goes through the process and it's ready to be approved? So the governing body, let's say there is a recommendation for approval, the governing body does approve it. Understand that the zoning is tied to this particular development plan. So we may have a rezoning that would occur waiting for the Corps of Engineers or waiting for some of the water and sewer approvals. And if those did not happen, the only thing that would be approved is to develop it the way the preliminary plan is shown. So the surety that the city has is that even if those things don't get approved, you can't just immediately see somebody new come in and take advantage of the R4 zoning. They would have to come back through a public hearing process with a new development plan that would propose something different than what would have been approved if it's approved through this process.
So if I understand you correctly, that's a huge benefit for the public.
It is in the sense of they know what's being approved, which is the duplex development that's approved through the process. If somebody were to change or want to pursue a different level of development here, even if this applicant wanted to change its plan for the future, it would still have to come through a revised process if it's a substantial change to what was previously approved.
Just for example, no one could come in and put in high-density apartments and that was our fault, is that correct?
Not without coming back through the process and having another public hearing, correct?
Commissioner Ginneman?
No, I think most of the other commissioners brought up the questions I was going to ask. I don't have any questions right now.
Commissioner Cooper?
I have a question. One of the citizens inquired about public space, and I know there's a overall plan for Gardner for green space in public parks, and I just wondered how that plays into this development.
So, as I understand this current development, none of the open space would be considered publicly held open space. Okay, so it's not a public park in the sense of the city parks department managing it and doing that. It does have open space incorporated into it. It does have trails going through it. I may let the applicant talk about how the public can access those things, but the maintenance, the installation, construction of this would be the responsibility of the developer in this particular case. The intent is that the trail that comes through here would ultimately tie into the Kill Creek Trail, which is a trail that's running along Kill Creek it's planned from 175th Street up to the north all the way up into near Celebration Park and then further north to tie into the county system. So the opportunity of walking those trails, bicycling those trails, or getting to that trail location here, this would give access to other people, but I'll let the applicant speak to the access here.
Todd Allenbrand, Payne and Brockway. The amenities, the pool and the parking, playground area, those would be reserved for the people that live in the development. But the intention for the trail would be if anybody wants to use it to walk on. One thing I want to point out, assuming we can come to an agreement with Public Works, which I think we'll be working through that. We have a couple locations for some off-street parking. We're not sure if that's going to be allowed by Public Works, but what we thought those could be used for would be if citizens outside the development wanted to come to the location and access the trails, they would have a place to park that wouldn't be immediately on the street causing potential traffic issues. They would actually have some parking spots to park and access the trail system. Does that take care of it, or you have any other questions?
I'm still curious, and maybe this requires a private or personal conversation with our staff, but I'm still curious as to how this all ties together
Well, I know, and I'll, sorry, real quick, the development Breckenwood Creek to the north, that's a quarter mile north, half a mile north. There's a trail system through the tract where the Kill Creek is at, and this would connect into that trail system that eventually I think would feed through future trail systems, and the city can speak on this, that would get up to some of the parks that are further north along the creek. I don't remember the names of the parks, I'm not familiar with them.
This tract of property has access to that trail?
It would connect to that trail, the Kill Creek Trail, that would connect to that same trail. They would just cross the street at Kill Creek to access the trail. When that trail and that other development gets built, as the phases come online.
So I had us switch over to the aerial here. It's not easy to see, but I'm gonna highlight a couple things here. The RP3 that you see to the right of the red box. So the red box again is the property we're talking about. The property where you see the RP3 in gold, just to the right of that on my screen, you can kind of see where there's tree lines that are coming along on the back side of that property. It's just a darker shade, if you will. That is the Kill Creek area. As part of the Prairie Brook development, the trail will go in a phase with that development. So the Prairie Brook villas that have been previously approved, there's a trail segment that's approved to be constructed through that. Then what was being referred to by the applicant's representative, the Breckenwood area, which is the property to the north, is required to build the trail on that continuing up to the north. So there is a segment here, the way this is currently laid out, this trail comes out at the northeast corner, right where it says Kill Creek Road, basically, and the single-family development in that upper right corner of the red box. There would need to be a connection that's built then to the Kill Creek Trail. So the intent is to try to bring all that trail system together through the open space. But each of those segments is the responsibility as the development's occurring, and the developers are putting those in as they do construction work. So I do know south of here, in between the existing Prairie Brook area, as you look at that, Kill Creek comes all the way to 175th. The City Parks Department is working on a segment of that trail to try to get that in the capital improvements program to finish it out all the way to 175th Street.
Commissioner Cooper, anything else covered? Great.
I am going to add one more thing.
Please.
Bob reminded me too. The other part that is being added on here is walking or sidewalks along 175th Street, not as part of this development, but the city project. They recently did improvements along Waverly. The intent is to bring sidewalks along the north side of 175th Street that would then tie into the Kill Creek Trail at that point too. So.
I'll just real quick, I don't have any other questions or comments, but well taken, public. Thank you for the input on the landscape and what can be done to mitigate that, along with, the park. I do recall in previous years that there was a park slated for St. John's, and it had been being pushed down in rank of priority, and now it's gone. So I would just like to make that, mention for the record and communication back to staff, because there is history there, and there has been a promised park for this very established neighborhood in Gardner, and I've seen it drop in priority on the capital improvements program, and now it's gone, or at least I haven't seen it recently, and I know we have that item up for discussion later.
And
just a comment on that.
Yeah, and I can certainly take that concern to the
Please.
Parks Department to see what's going on there. I'm not familiar with that history. Unfortunately, I haven't been here that long. So as Bob had described it, our understanding was in this particular area, there was a development proposal at one point in time in relationship to a park in this area. We just don't have the history on
Sure.
that. So, but I can raise that issue with the Parks Department.
Thank you. Looking around, other commissioners have other comments they'd like to make or questions here?
Yes, there was a question as to what the history of this has been. I was going back to the staff presentation, and I just want to read what was on the report here. The property was annexed on September 5th, 2000, for ordinance 1961. rezoned to RP3 on April 19, 2004. And it was platted on February 26, 2007. So, you know, the history is that it's been in the condition it's been in now and platted for Gardner Apartments, I believe, since 2007.
We don't have any other commissioner comments, discussion. I would entertain a motion on this item.
After review of application Z-22-03, Associated Preliminary Development Plan PDP-22-03, and Preliminary Plat PP-22-02 for Prairie Fire Crossing, the Planning Commission recommends the governing body approve the request to rezone 24.79 acres from R1 Single District Family Residential and RP3 Planned Garden Apartment Districts to RP4 Planned Mixed Density District associated with preliminary development plan and preliminary plat subject to the following conditions. Condition 1, approval of the deviations as presented upon acceptance by staff of revised plan documents reflecting improved plans and approval of preliminary stormwater management plan and traffic impact study by the Public Works Department.
I'll second.
We have a motion made by McNear with a second by Ham. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries with all in favor, 7-0. Next item, regular agenda item number 2, Stuber property, rezoning Z-22-05 in associated preliminary development plan PDP-22-04. This is another public hearing item located at the terminus of Lake Road 3 Street. We have a presentation from staff.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Again, this is item 2. This is a rezoning petition, basically going from R1, and this is kind of an unusual situation, but bear with me. I'll try to explain why we recommended the petitioner to go to RP2. So again, this is a property that's right now currently zoned R1. They're going for the RP2 in order to be able to rebuild on the lot that their existing house is on. And they're planning on rebuilding another single-family house on it. So even though it's RP2, the only way to fit a house on this lot, because we don't have, in our current standards, we don't have any lakefront housing districts in our zoning classifications. We have to work with what we have, and I didn't feel like we should try to push a variance through because, again, frankly, you guys are very well trained at what is eligible for a variance, and this doesn't really meet the qualifications for a variance. So again, this is the property. It's basically located at the terminus of Lake Road 3, and it's really just right across the street from the municipal golf course. Back in 2019, they purchased a portion of the north side, or basically lakefront. They purchased a parcel from the Department of Public Works. Public Works, they sell parcels all on the lake all the time to connect the original lots up with the waterfront. So they also went through a plat of this property to combine that parcel and their existing lot into one. Then after that, the owners had planned on remodeling their existing house. At least that's what, when they met with me, they had planned on remodeling the existing house to add some accessibility features. But as later determined, it was more economical to knock the house down and rebuild with these accessibility features installed in the new house. This is just a picture of what they're proposing. As you can see from the right-hand side of the property, they have quite a nice little stretch of property up until the shoreline of Gardner Lake. But on the west-hand side, which is the terminus of Lake Road 3, they don't have a lot of distance to work with right there. Again, the comprehensive plan does allow for low-density residential. They do allow for R2 zoning, new growth areas. We're looking to contribute to the existing character of the neighborhood. We believe that this new house is a nice new investment into that neighborhood up around the Gardner Lake. It is, as Dave likes to point out, this is specifically zoned for a single family house, even though it has the RP2 request. This request is for a single family home. Don't know how this happened, but the plan reflects generally accepted and sound planning and urban design principles. Benefits from any flexibility and the standards allows the project higher end amenities for the residential, including a garage structure, which will allow for them to put their boat inside. And again, the applicant is wishing to improve their property and would not be able to do so within the current standards of the Land Development Code. Again, our code just doesn't address lakefront properties. The proposed plan is in keeping with the comprehensive plan. The proposed rezoning and associated preliminary development plan are for a single-family detached house. And also, again, I've been working with the homeowners and their contractor to come up with a process to where they can actually rebuild on their existing lot out the lake. And as we're all familiar with, deviations for R2. These are the typical deviations, with the exception of the garages, which are typically when we view lakefront properties, the lake is usually the front of the house and the roadside is the rear. Again, our zoning code doesn't address that, so we have to view the back side of the house as the front side. So looking for a deviation from the frontage, a hardscape allowance, 5% to 20% for neighborhood yard. They're looking at 62%. They do have some green space, but they do have a large garage to house the boat and their vehicles. The second one is for the sidewalk connection. There aren't any sidewalks out the lake, so there's nothing to connect to. The neighborhood access width limits, again, we've got 15% on neighborhood yard standard with 20 foot maximum. They're looking at 36 feet. Again, the boat is probably what's taken up a lion's share of that. And then the detached house neighborhood design standards for garage limits, 25% of the facade. Again, as I explained earlier, the frontage of the house, which is atypically viewed as the rear, they're going to have about 80% with one entranceway off of their frontage. So they're looking at a 80% deviation on that. Staff recommends approval of all the deviations. And staff recommends approval of the rezoning from R1 Single Family Residential District to RP2 District and associated preliminary development plan with conditions outlined below.
Thank you, Bob.
Sure.
Do we have the applicant with us this evening? Anything they'd like to bring forth? Please come forward, state your name and address for the public record.
Okay, so Chris Stuber, I'm the applicant. This whole process has kind of really caught me off guard, and maybe it was because I didn't really dig deep enough. The original plans that we submitted for the variance were basically to tear down about 90% of the house, keep the basement, and part of the master bedroom. The rest was gonna be torn down. It's all structurally bad. The contractor came to us shortly after we had submitted just that for the variance and said, well, hey, I have another plan. I want you to take a look at it and see what you think. And basically what the plan was changing was to dig out an all-new basement. There are structural problems under the master bedroom already there. Those would have to be rebuilt. I'm not used to this process, and it's very crazy out of Gardner Lake. So Alex put these plans together, and we said, hey, let's go for it. We'd really like that. That will resolve. I've got a basement that I've been fighting water in. I've had a French drain put in. We've got springs up the hill, and it would be all new basement. The actual above ground structure of the house did not change at all. It was simply putting a full basement under it. And I kind of got caught off guard. Bob had to call us and say, hey, wait a minute, this is new construction. And we're like, okay, we didn't know this would be different. And that's when it kind of ran through everything we'd have to go through. I had kind of heard through the grapevine that some of the neighbors were concerned about multifamily units being built around there, and that's, I just heard that recently. That's all new to me. The way I understood this, it was simply going to affect this property and that road, and all the property. You got the beach house property, and then you've got Susie's property up above, and they're all privately owned. They would have to consent to have something built on there, and I don't think they would. Part of this is also, and I don't have Dan here, I'm not trying to represent him, but he's always told me he's the property right next door. Dan's a fireman in Kansas City, Kansas. He fully intends on building on that as well. When he retires, he wants to build his home there. So I think this whole process would have to happen if he was doing that. But as far as to any of my neighbors, I never ever intended. The whole reason I want to move to Gardner Lake is because of what it is. It's beautiful around there, and it's peaceful and quiet. I would absolutely hate to see additional construction like multifamily units built anywhere around there. That was never my intention. Again, a lot of this I was kind of caught off guard by. I did not know any of this had to happen. I thought, well, you own a property, you can either fix it up or you can rebuild it. But I've done so much repair work to that house, and it's getting really, really hard for me to do. And I just thought, you know what, it's time to let a professional come in and get this property done. And that's the only reason I'm here, is simply I just want to build my house. I've been going to Gardner Lake since I was a teenager. I went there with my first wife for years. I had been looking at properties years ago, just right across the way in the Cove. As I've lived there, I've watched Todd across build a brand new house on the point of the lake. I've watched 3 properties over build a brand new house. This never occurred to me that it would be different than anybody else trying to build. So again, my intention was never to offend or worry any neighbors at all. I was just simply trying to build my house. I moved back to my old house in the suburbs. That's where I raised my kids, and I've never really liked the suburbs, but when you have kids, it's nice to be in a neighborhood for the little kids to be around. So that's my whole intention. I plan to do nothing but retire there at Gardner Lake.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with any questions the commission might have. I appreciate you.
Madam Chair, I'm going to interrupt before we do the public hearing, just because I want to clarify a number of things and hopefully put some things at ease. Many of you, and I would say it's rarely or very unusual that we have a lake property before us. There's not that many properties along Gardner Lake or near Gardner Lake that are actually in the city limits. We have a very limited area just to the east or northeast of the golf course that's kind of tucked in there that is in the city limits. What makes these situations so unique is that the properties there are configured in very unique ways and creative ways sometimes. Some are very small. Many do not meet the requirements of our R1 district just by the nature of the property lines themselves. So short of any development, that's a problem that we have, is it was all zoned to R1, which is single family, which is exactly what the uses are, but every lot out there is essentially a non-conforming. It's a legal, L-E-G-A-L, lot, okay, but it's a non-conforming status because it doesn't necessarily have the size or dimensions or setbacks that are required under that R1 zoning. So in a way, I'm glad the neighbors are here because this will go for anybody that has property within the city. It is likely that if you're thinking about an addition or reconstruction of your property, you're going to have to come through a similar process like this so that we can get the property into a conforming zoning district. And that's essentially what we're doing here tonight. This is such a small lot and it's configured in such a manner that we have to get a zoning district that will allow for the construction to occur the way it is. As was stated by the applicant, initially they came in for a variance to do some addition work and broaden and expansion the footprint of their single family home that was out there. As Bob mentioned, that criteria, there's 5 very stringent criteria that have to be met in order to grant a variance. One of those is it has to be a unique circumstance. Well, obviously we have more than one lot that has this kind of situation, so it would not qualify for a variance. When we heard about the rebuild, or what we would call rebuild or reconstruction of the home, the problem is when you substantially tear that house down, you lose your non-conforming rights. So therefore that took this into the realm of how do we get the appropriate zoning for the parcel of property so that the reconstruction of the house can occur and it's all conforming within the appropriate zoning district. So as we've talked about before, even though this says R2, we're putting that P on there. We're making this a planned district, so the plot plan that is associated with this single family home will become the plan for that property. So that it will be a single family home, and that's all it can be under that zoning with that plot plan. So that gives that status. Again, it allows these deviations, which we have to have in order to actually reconstruct that house in its configuration. They need the deviations from the code, and this is the only way or only process by which we can do that. So I want to reassure those that are in the audience that this has nothing to do with multifamily. There is no other proposal except for this parcel that is owned by the applicant, and that it is for a single family development. The zoning designation is merely there to get to the conforming district with this kind of lot configuration. At the end of this, I'll speak to what may be an ultimate solution, but this is the only process by which we can get the applicant to a place where they can basically what I would call rebuild or reconstruct their home in the manner that they're talking about. So I hope that helps to clarify some.
I'm glad you added that bit for color. That was good clarity to follow up with you. We'll now open the public hearing. Those that wish to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name and address for the public record. Please come forward, state your name and address for the public record.
My name's Jim. Excuse me. My name's Jim Shippey. I live at 15383 Lake Road 2. I do have a question to David. Because I want him to be able to get done what he wants to get done. My biggest concern is having the designation of the R2 and the unforeseeable consequences that this may impose. Because as we know, everything's for sale. There's 4 pieces of property in this designated area. Someone could come in and say, okay, I'm going to give you guys $5 million and I'm going to buy you out and I'm going to tear everything down and I'm going to build a 10-plex. If Johnson County Wastewater goes along with it, says, okay, yeah, our sewer system will carry it, it'll be good. What designation is he going to have? Is he going to go R1 or is it going to go R2?
He will have no designation. He will not have the ability to do what you just described. The plan that is approved, and what makes this different is this is adding a letter P to the designation,
Okay.
which means it's associated to a specific plan, which is the plan that's been presented by
Okay.
this property owner. So anything like what you've just described, at that level, would have to come back to the city. We would have to consider it all through a public process again, all with a public
Okay,
hearing.
so what you're
with this
saying is
property.
that just because there is it's actually, the designation is an RP2.
Correct. The P is what makes
It
this,
says-
or ties.
Okay, it's almost like a
specific
special
regulation.
use district,
Yes.
like
It's
we have
very
out there,
similar to-
yeah, like we have with the sewer system out there.
It's,
Okay.
it's very similar to a special use, but it's actually even more demanding because the plan becomes the regulatory document.
For that particular
For that
piece of
particular
property.
piece of
So if
property.
Dan at some point wanted to, who set this out to him, wanted to go ahead and do something, Dan could basically dovetail off of this.
He could not necessarily dovetail.
Well, when I say dovetail, but I mean, the process would be a little bit smoother for him to be able to.
Hopefully so,
Yeah.
yes. Hopefully so, because what we're hoping we've done is place the property itself with its dimensions and everything in the right district that allows for certain setbacks. You still have to meet some coverage requirements.
Sure.
You still have to do some things that may require amending the plan.
Mhm.
But hopefully if there's a minor element that needs to be tweaked, something where.
Right.
you wanna
There's
make-
always some sort of, nothing ever is gonna go smooth when you're trying to do something like this.
Right.
Okay,
But-
good.
But in general, the reassurance for the people out there is that this is tied specifically to the plan that was submitted by the
Okay,
property.
and it only is designated for that specific piece of
For that
property
specific-
under that specific.
Right, as a single family.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Thank you. Any others wishing to speak? Please come forward, state your name and address for the public record. Seeing no others coming forward, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to close the public hearing made by Hanson with a second by McNear. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Public hearing is now closed. This is commission discussion. I'll start all the way down with Commissioner Souza. Questions for staff, and we do have the applicant.
When I was reading this at home, I had a lot of questions. But, now that you guys explained differences, because I said, why changing from single home to, I didn't understand. But now that you explained that, I think I'm good at that questions.
Good. Commissioner Ham?
Yeah, it was straightforward. I think we've been seeing a lot of this come across lately. The non-conforming part I was not aware of, but it makes sense. But overall, it seems very straightforward and very well put together. So that's my only comment.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson?
Based on the dialogue that's occurred prior to our discussion, I have no questions.
Commissioner McNear?
Kudos to staff and the property owner. It's very nice to see the public and private ownership working together to make things happen in a way that creates an outcome for beneficial to all. Thank you.
Commissioner Ginniman?
No questions.
And Commissioner Cooper?
No questions.
I don't have any questions either. There's nothing else from staff or anyone on this item. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. After review of application Z-22-05 and the associated preliminary development plan PDP-22-04 for Stuber property, the Planning Commission recommends the governing body approve the request to rezone 0.1865 acres from R-1 Single-Family Residential District to RP2 Plan 2-Family Residential District, subject to the following condition. 1, approval of deviations as presented upon acceptance by staff of revised plan documents reflecting the approved deviations.
Second.
We have a motion made by Ham with a second by McNear. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries with all in favor, 7-0.
Madam Chair, I'm just gonna, for the folks that are in the audience, just so everybody knows, for this process, and I failed to mention this at the end of the last one, but it's the same process. This item, the Plan Commission is making a recommendation to the City Council. This item will be heard by the City Council on July 18th at their regular meeting. It starts at 7 p.m. in these chambers. And I'm sorry I missed that on the first item, but I want to make sure the folks that are here heard that.
Great, thank you. Okay, regular agenda item number 3, CIP conformance review. Presentation from staff. Mr. Shute. We're not on every.
Yeah. Everybody's concerned. The little girl. That's what I'm going back to go get. That's right. That's why you didn't come. Hear the results of.
Bob's going to go talk to them outside for a second, so I'll let them clear out here and then we'll get started. While he's doing that, what I am going to mention here just very quickly, a couple remedies to this situation that we're looking at. One is developing a particular zoning district to the lake properties themselves. We've got a lot of things out there that are very unique, so just so you're aware, we're not sure that's possible, but because of the limited amount of area that we have out there under our jurisdiction for zoning purposes, that's one aspect that we've looked at in the long run, is the idea of maybe we can get a unique district that would help with this. It is a very odd situation, but again, the variance was very limited because they would have never met the criteria, and they would have come before the BZA, which is one of the roles you play, and it would have been demonstrated that essentially they could not meet all 5 of the performance criteria, and so we did not want to run them through that process. So I think this was the best way we could handle this at this point in time. The other part that I'm looking at is renaming our zoning categories and districts because of the amount of this that we go through. So just be aware that I'm trying to think of a numbering and naming system that'll be a little bit more generic in the sense of what we're really trying to accomplish versus this is really taking a very traditional form of zoning categories and naming and then tried to bring this hybrid design quality to it. And people always get confused when we go through this planned zoning district. That's why I keep trying to explain it at every meeting. I'm hopeful that eventually people will catch on. So just very quickly, I think we're good to go here. So I'm gonna go ahead with item number 3, if that's okay with you. This is the Capital Improvement Program Conformance Review process. This is an annual process that the Planning Commission actually goes through each year as part of a statutory requirement. I'm gonna hopefully hit the right thing here. It's actually Kansas Statute 12-748, which links the capital improvement program to the comprehensive plan. If you remember, the comprehensive plan for the city is adopted by the city. It's a long-range vision. It looks at our growth areas and where we see ourselves expanding and some of the improvements that may be necessary to support that expansion. This statute requires that annual review. When that CIP comes up as part of our budgetary process, we look to the Planning Commission to make a determination of conformance with the comprehensive plan in order to move that program forward for City Council or governing body consideration. What's important about that is this statute, this is the coverall, if you will, for the public improvements. Otherwise, each individual public improvement as it was happening would have to come up to the Planning Commission as part of its process to get that concurrence and then move forward. This allows for that blanket coverage because we do a 5-year program here. So you are tonight just reviewing this for conformance with the comprehensive plan. We're not here to discuss particulars of various projects or budget costs or anything else. That's left to the financial department, that is left to the governing body itself. But the intended result, as I mentioned before, is that we are pursuing the plan, the comprehensive plan, and this is a way that we implement through some of our budget tools. So we're tying planning documents to budget tools, and we're tying immediate public investments to long-range goals, if you will, in the plan. Just to give you an idea, the comprehensive plan in Chapter 12 in particular, the capital improvement element, which is the CIE, looks out 20 years or more. So it's a long-range document. The capital improvement program is a 5-year document. So we're in much more immediacy there. And then in this city, the capital budget is done on a 2-year rotation. So we have 2-year budgets cycles that we go through here. So the idea is if you think about the layering of implementation, it goes from long range down to the more immediate elements, and this capital improvement program is what gives us guidance for the next 5 years on expenditures. You might remember the comprehensive plan goals. There's a few broad ones here that have to do with, in general, what you would be looking at, what staff looks at. We do have these statements within the comprehensive plan for high quality and dependable public services and facilities, maintaining a safe and efficient transportation network, and supporting growth. Those are broad umbrella type goals, if you will, that are in the comprehensive plan. As we drill down further and we look at the land use map and we look at all the infrastructure master plans and things that are out there, the water system master plan, the sewer master plan, the parks master plan, that is where things are supposed to be outlined in a more geographic way. Okay, so you have the broad goals of what's trying to be done in the comp plan, you have the future land use and growth map that's tied to that, and then various departments have their master plans which get into further detail as to what they're planning to do. As part of that, then, we also then look at the CIP and we look at how do we identify needs, how do we determine costs, how do we prioritize capital requests, and then developing the financial strategies to implement those. So that really falls in the finance department's realm, if you will. So the finance department is generally the lead agency in putting the capital improvements program together, but they reach out to the various departments, utilities, public works, those that are making capital investments into the community. They reach out to them as to what is needed based on their master plans, or sometimes they are new items that come up through a variety of different things. They may have had a water main break, or something was revealed in a further analysis about a segment of a sewer system, or there was a demand for some parks improvements somewhere that are more immediate than what was originally intended. But the idea is they come forward with their proposals and what they see happening in the next 5 years. Those are prioritized through a staff exercise and through the finance department to identify strategies that then would help implement it financially. What you're going to see tonight a little bit is a couple items where you might say, well, is that really important? Is that really a strategy? But that's what happens when we start adding the finance layer. Sometimes there's funding made available for specific types of improvements, and you want to take advantage of that funding, even though it might be a lower priority item in the grand scheme of things, because of specific funds that may come from specific agencies for specific tasks. That cycle can be very different than what our overall priorities are. So we want to leverage those dollars when we have the opportunity to use them. With that, what I'm going to focus on, you had in your packet a long number of sheets there to look at. The first two sheets are an overview of all the projects, if you will, by the various departments. They're categorized for you there. Gives you a sense of the timeline and the dollar amounts associated with each of those projects. And then the backup information, there's an individual sheet or two on each one of those projects that gave you a little more detail, if you will, regarding the project itself. Tonight, I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions. Again, we don't get into those details that greatly, so if you bring up a specific project and a specific question, I'm glad to take that, or we'll record that and we can take it forward and try to get answers for that. But again, tonight we're just looking primarily, does this conform with the comprehensive plan? With that, I do want to talk to just a few things that are new this year that weren't there last year, if you will. So when I go through this, I'm going to try to give you a rough idea of some of these new items and where they fit. And if you'll remember, I mentioned those three broad goals of the comprehensive plan. So the next two slides here are really organized around those three goals. Under high quality and dependable public services and facilities, you'll notice that there are 3 playground replacements that are listed there for 2023. This is an item that's been getting a lot of discussion actually at the governing body over the last few months. It has come up as a priority. These are playgrounds that are scheduled to be replaced. They were aging, they were getting old anyway. But the key here is that the tack that's being taken is that these will be inclusive playgrounds. So inclusive playgrounds are a little bit different. They're taking into consideration special needs in a special needs population. So they'll be developed a little bit different than the traditional playground that you're used to. And again, those items have been brought forward in a more immediate way into the 2023 capital improvements program. Under safe and efficient transportation network, I want to just highlight the airport in particular, and this has to do with federal funding from the FAA. Over the years, we are very dependent on that funding in order to execute things at the airport itself. So they do allow us to aggregate funds and actually take several years worth of funding, put it together to make improvements. So what you see here in regard to constructing the turf taxiway and reconstructing the aprons, all are associated with those FAA funds and when they become available and how we can go about those improvements. So those are new because there has been a push about the airport out there and making improvements at the airport. I believe the commission's aware. Commissioner Ham has been serving on a study group, and it was more about the business aspect of the airport, how it operates and what its target audience is, if you will, or serving, who they're serving. But this runs hand in hand. Those documents, those studies run hand in hand. The other item that you'll see on there, which is an item that you should be glad to see moving into this program, it's 167th Street from Center to Moonlight, Reconstruction. My understanding is that would incorporate at least 3 lanes, a bike lane, and some trail aspects to it. So from the standpoint of that area, as you know, we've had a lot of development pressure between White and Moonlight. This actually goes all the way to Center as part of a project. So hopefully the target is 2026. Understand that's off a little ways because the funding cycles where we have to go through to Mid-America Regional Council and we go through their process of STP funding, the Surface Transportation Program there, they have already made commitments for some of these years that we're leading into. So the idea is here is we're gonna get this in as quickly as possible and look for openings along the way. So if somebody returns funds or does something different, hopefully we have a project that is designed, ready to go, and we can take advantage of that in a sooner time frame. But at this point in time, to get into that rotation, the target is 2026. So just be aware of that. Under supporting growth, this area really highlights a number of things. There's been a lot of study work being done on our sewer system, our sanitary sewer system at this point. As you know, we have growth pressure on the east side of the interstate, I-35, and much of the discussion has been how do we serve that with sewer in the future. There are ways that we're tying into our existing system, but as we tie into our existing system, that puts capacity constraints on our current plant up at Kill Creek to the north because we're funneling everything that direction. So these improvements that you see listed here are new since last year, but they have been identified through the Public Works and Utilities departments as to prioritization for areas of need that have to get addressed in order for us to handle the growth that we're experiencing. And actually this will save, what do I want to say? This will help us with providing service throughout the whole community. Several of these not relief lines, but some of the lines that are listed here are taking out lift stations and allowing us to become a more efficient system under the current parameters of operation. So with that, that's the overview that I have for you tonight. The recommended motion is that after you review the 23 through 27 capital improvement program, you'll find that the proposed program is in conformance with the adopted Gardner comprehensive plan. And I stand ready for any questions you may have.
Perfect. All right, well, we'll start with questions down to my right. Commissioner Suazo.
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Ham?
I don't have any questions. After looking through everything, I was very relieved to see that we were addressing things to support all of the things that have been coming in front of us and looking through all of the many papers. Yeah. I'm like, okay, so we are addressing the infrastructure to support the growing community.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add to that for just a second. Matt will appreciate this. Matt Wolf, our finance director, will appreciate when I say this. There are many requests and demands also that are not in the CIP that are still out there in regard to supporting the growth that's going on. We have growth hitting us from all angles at this point in time. These are the items that we feel in the best balance we can start moving forward with. But I will say there are others that are out there.
That was my only comment.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson?
Just a question, on the playground
Mhm.
projects. Just frame of reference, where is Stone Creek Park and Wynwood Park? I know where Veterans Park is at, but where is?
Genesee Creek
Ye-
Estates and Park, off of White Drive.
Off White Drive, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. That's all.
Okay.
Stone Creek's over there.
Yes, I think Stone
Or
Creek.
by-
Bob was here, he could help me with that.
Or not Plum Creek, Pumpkin Ridge.
I think so. I think it's over on this side. Yeah. They're established parks within the system itself, so they're not new parks.
Good? Okay. All right. Commissioner McNear?
Very nice job putting this together. A lot of detail. The prioritization was excellent. And Mr. Ham mentioned support for the infrastructure that some of these growth projects. Good to see. Great job.
Commissioner Juniman?
Yeah, no questions.
Commissioner Cooper?
No questions.
I don't have any questions either. Thank you guys for the update and review. With that, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
Should've left it up there.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Can we move the little video thing there?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
There we go. Okay, after review of proposed 2023 to 2027 capital improvement program, the planning commission finds the proposed program to be in conformance with the adopted Gardner comprehensive plan.
Second.
We have a motion made by McNear with a second by Ham. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries with all in favor, 7-0. And that brings us to the end of our regular agenda. Is there anything else from staff this evening?
Just a couple items. First, I'm gonna thank Melissa. She's getting pretty good at this tech stuff, so that's nice that she was able to get the box to drop out of there. Real quick, 2 items that I want you to be aware of. One, mobile food vendors. You may have noticed a number of food trucks, vans, whatever, with trailers, all kinds of stuff going on, and some very creative ways of delivering their services. Staff is looking at this. I mentioned it to the city council last Monday. We are looking into a number of things because of the creative solutions that are going on. They have stretched our regulations beyond, I think, what was intended. So we are going to find ourselves proposing some regulations in regards to some things. I'll point to a couple things. Out to the west here, we've got a trailer that's come in recently that has taken advantage of zoning that was there already. It was commercial zone. I guess there was a previous restaurant there quite a while back. So the zoning remained. It was not a planned district. So we didn't have that in our arsenal to sit there and say, no, you can't put the food trailer there. What we didn't anticipate was the connection to city utilities. So this has now become not necessarily a mobile unit, it is a semi-permanent unit. So they've gotten very creative about how they were running gray water to a sewer line that's in that property that was there, and some other things that just weren't anticipated. So we are also finding some pressure to do kind of what I'll call a food truck court. I don't know if you've seen those in other places, but it's the aggregation of food trucks on one parcel of property. Our code is really written for one operating unit on a property at any given time. So that's why when you think about the Patriot Bank property, you'll see one night you've got the Chick-fil-A trailer, one night you got the COD guy, one night you got whatever it is as they rotate through. That's because the way our permits and our regs are written, you can only have one on a site operating at any one time. And it's really intended that that truck or that trailer is going to move off the site, on the site. Well, you will notice that at Mulberry in Maine, we have on the northeast corner now 2 items there. One will not be allowed to open, even though it's a significant investment, because we can't have 2 operating simultaneously. Now, they alter their hours. One's on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The other's on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Then we're okay. But right now, we're working our way through some of those. The reason we've run into that little issue both issues. You may recall there was a snow cone place that used to sit right over here, and then there's a barbecue, Moose's that's over here just to the other side of Main Street. Over the years, the interpretation of the code was that they would allow these things to stay on site and operate on site and not have to move off the site. The problem is becoming is that's now getting leveraged. There are people that are going, well, wait a minute, I don't necessarily have to invest in this property per se to be here on a permanent level, and I can just basically park the truck here and not move it. So we are looking into regulations regarding some of those things too. As I said to the city council, we do not want to, what do I want to call it? We don't want to deter the entrepreneurial spirit. Okay, we want to make sure, and I think food trucks are kind of here to stay in the area, not just in the area, but it's becoming part of the experience that people want. And so we don't want to interfere with that, but we do need to get some regulations in place in regard to some of this permanency versus mobile aspect and what that means. I'm anticipating that when we have a proposal for food truck courts where we have multiple units and also where it gets more permanent, we're going to probably elevate the permitting to a conditional use permit versus just a temporary use permit. The temporary use permit that we use now can be issued for up to 1 year, okay, for that operation. And there's really no large requirements for investing in the parcel that that unit is being placed on. Because again, it's kind of seen as an accessory type use. It's there supplementing something else that's more permanent. Whereas some of these that are going semi-permanent or permanent, we need to check on traffic circulation. We need to figure out if the parking's really there. Do they have asphalt that covers all the parking area, or are they just taking advantage of the parcel? So there's a number of things there, both from a convenience and a safety aspect that we need to look at. And the conditional use permit would grant us that. And we can also grant that permit through you for a longer period of time. Conditional use permits would come to you, where the temporary use permits are an administrative permit right now. So those are things we're looking at. I'm telling you this because I'm hopeful that by next month I can have some drafted things put together. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible and stick to the spirit of the current ordinance, but we do know that we need to address these things before it gets out of hand. And some might argue that it's getting out of hand now. But
Do they have to be owned by Gardner residents? How does it work with the truck?
No, they basically, some are Gardner residents, some are people who live here that have it. Smoke and Soul, for instance, I think he just is down the road here, not real far. Yeah, and so, that some of them are Gardner residents, and it's their way of life, or they're making their money that way. Many are not. Chick-fil-A, for instance, that's the catering truck. It's coming down from one of the other Chick-fil-A franchises with a trailer full of food and basically selling it. So it just depends. Now, in some cases, like Chick-fil-A's, we do believe they may be doing a little bit of test marketing. How much volume can we do, and is it worthy of us looking at the market better? So you're kind of playing that game of what's the importance, whether it's in town or out of town. So right now, we do not require any type of licensing. They do have to meet KDHE and county requirements for health, just like any restaurant. They have an inspection that they have to go through, so they have to show us that. The fire district here has now joined with a number of the metro fire departments, and they have basically one set of inspection rules for fire protection. They all recognize them, and so when they're inspected in one town or another town, they have reciprocation to our jurisdiction. So our fire district just wants to see, do you have that sticker? If you don't, then you're subject to a fire inspection. In fact, on one of these units, that was done just a couple weeks ago, and they had to put in a fire suppression system over the grill, over the oven part of that. So there's a number of things there, and we're trying to now coordinate better with those jurisdictions than what was originally intended by the current code. So a little long-winded answer, but it accommodates just like any other business. If somebody has a business idea, comes to town, we just wanna make sure it's being done right.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have anything else?
I'll just update you reappointments. I checked with the city clerk. They're still trying to get the committee together who does the reappointment process and makes the recommendations to city council. Just so those of you who are up for reappointment, there's 3 of you. Just so you understand, your term continues to extend the way the code, I checked with the city clerk so that made sure we had an active quorum, because I was really fearful that we wouldn't, but the way the code is written, basically, even though you have an end date on your term, until they make their approval for the next, whether it's a reappointment or a new appointment or whatever, your term gets extended automatically till that point, because it's their delay administratively, it's not on us. So just be aware of that. I've been reassured by the city clerk that that's the case multiple times, because I keep worrying about it. I do not want us to make a decision and find out later that, oh, wait a minute, we didn't have the authority
Right.
because, so. Yeah,
Appreciate
that's
that.
the only other thing that I had.
Okay,
tonight.
thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we don't have anything else. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by McNear with a second by Cooper that we adjourn.